5. Real and truly terrifying stories on dates with strangers. Story 1. This happened last year when I was single. I'm 27 years old, but at that time I was 26. I had just downloaded the Tinder dating app, but I was only trying it out. I had no intention of meeting anyone at that time. I would open it once a day and read some profiles. When I say read, I mean looking at the photos because almost no one writes anything. I didn't actually match with anyone because I didn't swipe right even once. I was just there to observe. There was a guy who seemed to appear almost every time I logged in. His name was Alan. He was a good-looking guy, a bit overweight, and probably about 6 feet tall if I had to guess. I think Tinder has a paid feature where it will show your profile repeatedly, so maybe he had that. But I didn't care. I just kept swiping left to say not interested. Once, I was walking my dog in a park near my apartment and saw a guy walking towards me on the gravel path. As he got closer, he nodded politely, and I did the same. Something about the guy seemed familiar. It took me a few minutes to think, but eventually I realized it was Alan from Tinder. It wasn't a big deal, I thought. We live in a big city, so the chances of running into him were small but not unlikely. Over the next few weeks, I seemed to run into Alan a few more times, and it started to get creepy. I began to suspect I might have a stalker. One evening, I was in my room getting ready to go to sleep when I looked out the window and saw a pair of eyes looking at me. Someone was looking through my window. My apartment was on the 2nd floor, so it would have taken some effort to climb up there. As soon as we made eye contact, he disappeared. I approached the window and looked outside. I saw a man running. I could only see him from the back, but I'm pretty sure it was Alan. I immediately called the police. They suggested I stay with a friend that night, which I did. The next day, we went to the police station to file a report. I actually had no way to contact Alan, as we never met online or otherwise. What we did was quite creative. While discussing with the investigator, I opened the Tinder app and simply swiped until Alan's profile appeared. When it did, I told them that was him. The police issued a restraining order against Alan, and I'm glad to say we haven't crossed paths again. Story 2. Since I was 23 and started using the Tinder dating app some time ago, I had tried some of the other apps with little success, but I heard from a friend that this one was supposedly better. I believed him and created a profile. It wasn't long before I started getting matches. One of my matches was Gabriel. He was a year older than me, with brown hair and a somewhat artistic style, thick glasses with a beard. We had a pretty good conversation one night, and because of that, we decided to meet in person. There was a bar I had been to a few times with friends, and we agreed to go there. It wasn't my main place. You should never take online dates to your favorite places, just in case. I arrived a little late, so when I got there, Gabriel was waiting at the entrance. We went in and actually had a pretty good time. Gabriel was a bit socially awkward, but it wasn't that bad. In fact, I found him quite cute. We had a few drinks and talked for about 2 hours. Then we parted ways and I went home. Over the next few weeks, Gabriel would message me sporadically. I would say once every 2 or 3 days on average. Hours or even days would pass without responding, and that to me is a big red flag. Eventually, I stopped responding to him. I thought he wasn't ready for someone like me. No hard feelings. Fast forward a few weeks, and I was home bored when I got a notification on my phone. It was Gabriel. I was surprised to hear from him, but somehow in a positive way. He asked if I wanted to go out that night, and as I said, I was bored, so I agreed. This time, I gave him my address so he could pick me up. Half an hour later, he stopped in front of my building. He had a blue Honda Civic with a big dent in the rear bumper. I got in, and as soon as I did, the atmosphere felt strange. As I mentioned before, he was a bit awkward, but this time he barely said a word. I immediately regretted my decision to get in the car with his guy. I decided that as soon as we stopped, I would make an excuse and get out of there. This time we were going to another bar, and when Gabriel parked the car, I pretended to have an important call and said I had to leave. I could see from the expression on his face that he didn't believe me, but I turned around and left, and he didn't try to stop me. When I was on the bus, I blocked and deleted Gabriel from Tinder and blocked his number on my phone as well. He didn't do anything that bad. He just gave me a strange feeling. It's hard to explain. It just felt weird. However, if that had been the end, this wouldn't be a very scary story. In the following days, Gabriel sent me a friend request on Facebook and also followed me on Instagram. I started to feel uneasy, so I blocked him on both apps. A few days passed and nothing really happened. However, eventually I started to see some things that really scared me. I started to see his car parked on the street near my work and even near my apartment building. The dent in the bumper was a clear sign. It started to seem like he was stalking me. A few weeks passed, and I kept seeing the car from time to time, but I never saw Gabriel. However, that would eventually change. One evening, I was coming home late from work. I was walking on the sidewalk. It was dark, and for reasons I can't explain, a chill ran down my spine. That's when I looked across the street and saw Gabriel's car. It was a very quiet night. The street was almost completely empty, so I felt very vulnerable. At that moment, I was grabbed from behind. A man's arm was around me. It was Gabriel. We struggled for what seemed like many minutes, but it was probably only a few seconds. Soon it was obvious that I couldn't beat him, so I did the only thing I could think of. I screamed as loud as I could and didn't stop. Eventually, the noise must have caught the attention of some people because some came out onto the street from one of the nearby apartment buildings. As soon as that happened, Gabriel left. I called the police that night and told them the whole story. Fortunately, I wrote down Gabriel's license plate number, so it wasn't hard to track him down. There are still legal charges pending against him for what he did, but I was given a restraining order practically overnight. There were many warning signs for what ultimately happened. Looking back, I feel like I should have called the police as soon as I started seeing his car parked in my neighborhood. Signs like that should never be ignored, and I almost paid a terrible price for it. Story 3. Hello, I'm Nicolas, and I'm 26 years old, but this happened a few years ago when I was 25. I had been using online dating apps for about 6 months at that time. Like most people, I was skeptical at first. My biggest fear was that I would meet a girl and it would end up being a group of guys playing a prank on me. My biggest fear was humiliation. However, this story is not about humiliation. What happened to me was much worse. I matched with a girl named Karen on the Bumble dating app. She was my age, with blonde hair and some tattoos, which were just my type. After exchanging a few messages, I asked her to meet in real life. She agreed, and I sent her my number. I usually like to take our communication off the app as soon as possible, as it feels a bit more personal when you have someone's number. However, she didn't text me and continued using Bumble's Messenger. I assumed she just wanted to make sure I was real before giving out any personal information. I respected that and didn't push the issue. Karen suggested we meet at a small bar downtown. It was within walking distance from my apartment, so it was perfect for me. I walked there and arrived about 10 minutes early. When I got to the bar, I noticed it was closed. It was a Tuesday night, so not exactly the busiest time for bars. I opened the app and messaged Karen saying I was there and the bar was closed. She replied and suggested another place down the street from there. She also told me there was a shortcut through a park. I agreed to go to the other place and started walking while heading to the sidewalk, checking my messages to see if there were any updates from Karen. I had a message from her saying she was there waiting and that I should hurry and go through the park. I agreed and started walking faster. It was 8 p.m. and the sun had set, so when I got to the park, it was almost dark. The small path through it had no lighting, so I didn't really feel comfortable walking through there. Instead, I started running on the sidewalk so as not to keep my date waiting longer than necessary. When I got to the bar, I was exhausted from running. I stayed outside for a minute on the sidewalk before going in so I could calm down and catch my breath. I took this time to check my messages again, but when I looked on Bumble, I was shocked to see that Karen had blocked me. I looked at my phone, still breathing heavily. I was confused. Why would she delete me right before our date? Once I was ready, I went into the bar. I assumed it was a mistake, so I could just find her and then exchange information if things went well. I went in and walked around the bar for a few minutes, but Karen was nowhere to be found. The place was small and she was definitely not there. That's when I started connecting the dots. She was leading me into a trap. She had probably suggested the first place because she knew it would be closed. Then she could lead me to the park. which was on the way to this place. I assumed there was some kind of ambush waiting for me. Fortunately, when I got there, I knew it didn't feel right. Although at the time, I wasn't sure why. She must have deleted me when she realized the plan had failed. Although I was disappointed and definitely terrified by this incident, I realized it could have turned out much worse. Always make sure to follow your intuition and don't do anything that makes you feel uncomfortable when meeting people online. Although I still believe most people are good, there are some out there who want to harm you. Story 4. To give you some context, I'm an 18-year-old guy currently living in Mexico City. I'm 6 feet 1 inch tall and muscular. I've always been one of the bigger guys in my class and look older than I am. I stopped growing in 9th grade 4 years ago, so that should give you an idea of what I mean. I was that 8th grade kid who could already grow a full beard. There's always one of us in every school. This happened last month, right after my 18th birthday. I was alone after a breakup with my girlfriend of 7 months and was looking for an outlet, so I turned to Tinder. I created a profile with my real photos and lied about my age, saying I was 24. I matched with a beautiful girl. She was almost too good to be true, but I went ahead anyway. We exchanged some innocent messages and planned to meet at her house the next day at 9 p.m. I wasn't as excited as you might think. I had my doubts about whether she was real or not. The next day, as 9 p.m. approached, I was getting ready to go to her house. Before I left, I sent a message to my dad saying I was going to a friend's house. I asked my good friend Carlos, who is 6 years older than me, to take me since I didn't have a car. He drove me to her apartment, and I rang the doorbell. I heard light footsteps behind the door and a high-pitched voice saying, "Coming." That's when I sent a message to Carlos saying everything was fine and he could leave. As soon as the door opened, I felt a tremendous relief because I was face to face with the girl from the photos. Unfortunately, that feeling would be short-lived. As soon as I entered, she asked if I wanted a drink. I politely declined, which caused a noticeable change in her attitude. This made me suspicious of her intentions. Realizing I might be in trouble, I asked to use the bathroom to have a chance to contact my friend. She anxiously agreed. I went into the bathroom and quickly sent a message to Carlos asking for an Uber. Looking up from my phone, I could barely make out what seemed to be a dark figure behind the shower curtain. Before I was sure of what I was seeing, the figure jumped like a cat, and I found myself in a struggle with this mysterious man. I was absolutely terrified, despite being much bigger than him. He was probably 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighed about 1,076 pounds, bald, and seemed to be in his 30s. I'm 6 feet 1 inch tall and weigh almost 220 pounds. Once I regained control, I was able to easily overpower him. I threw him to the ground and punched him a couple of times in the face. After that, Carlos messaged me to say he was waiting outside the building. Just then, the girl burst into the bathroom and started screaming. I ran past her and out of that apartment. When I got to the car, I frantically explained what had happened. Only then did I realize I could have been drugged, robed, or worse. I took screenshots of her profile and all the messages between us. Despite gathering all that evidence, there was still little the police could do, as it was just my word against theirs. I got away with little more than a scare. The moral of the story is to always meet in a public place for a first date, probably for the second one too, just to be safe. Story sync: after my marriage ended, I was in a tough financial situation. I was working part-time as a waitress and had an apartment I couldn't afford. It wasn't luxurious or anything, but I wasn't making enough to keep up with the rent. At that time, I started using Tinder to meet new people. I had used it in the past. In fact, that's how I met my first husband. I was at home swiping on the app one night, and no one really caught my attention. Maybe I was being too picky, or maybe I hadn't gotten over my ex yet. However, after a while, an interesting profile popped up. His name was Martin, and he was actually a few years younger than me. I'm usually interested in older guys, not much older, but I had never dated someone younger before. I went through each of his photos several times. They showed him in different places, a white sandy beach, another in Mexico City, and even a picture of Martin that seemed to be in front of a private jet. I know it sounds superficial, but that was the truth about what made him stand out. That wasn't the only reason I was interested. It was simply what made him stand out initially. I swiped right on Martin, which was the only right swipe I had made so far, and then put my phone away and went to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I opened my phone and saw I had a match on Tinder. I knew it was Martin because he was the only one I had accepted. I opened my messages and saw he had already contacted me. All he said was, "Hi." That was a bit annoying to me. If you're going to contact me, try to say a little more than that. However, this time I let it slide, and we started having a conversation. After no more than 5 or 10 messages each, Martin asked me out on a date. I accepted, and we made plans for the following Friday night. We went to a really nice restaurant, much fancier than I would have suggested. He was a slightly awkward guy. I really can't put my finger on why. We had a decent conversation, but there were more awkward silences than I'm used to. However, it was a first date, and first dates can be awkward. When the bill came, I was a bit nervous that Martin would want to split the cost of the night. I didn't know how much it would be, but I knew I couldn't afford it. That's why I was relieved when Martin grabbed the bill from the table without hesitation. After that, we parted ways, and I headed home by bus. Martin and I went out a few more times in the following weeks. As before, we always had a pretty good time, but there was something odd about him. It was like he was trying too hard to impress me. It was clear he had money and didn't mind spending it on me. Things were getting more and more extravagant. He took me on a river cruise over the weekend that must have cost at least $3,000 in total. All that for a woman who wasn't even his girlfriend yet. I don't want to sound ungrateful, but it seemed to be a red flag. Things came to a head when Martin texted me and invited me on a trip to Mexico. Although it was tempting, I wasn't ready to take that step. I felt bad, but I broke things off with him via text message. After that, my phone rang. It was Martin. I answered, and I was immediately bombarded with the most vile and hateful insults I had ever heard in my life. This guy was furious. I had never seen this side of him before. While we were dating, Martin was a really polite and shy guy. I kept the phone to my ear for a minute or two, and the yelling didn't stop, so I finally hung up the phone and turned it off. I was scared. I didn't know what this guy was capable of. He also knew where I lived because he had dropped me off at my apartment once or twice before. The next morning, I turned on my phone, and there were dozens of missed calls and tons of messages from Martin. I don't remember the exact content of the messages, but they were filled with the same insults as before. I didn't respond for the next few days, but eventually, I decided to call him and try to calm things down. He answered the phone and started yelling at me like before. I tried to calm him down for a minute or so, but it was useless. He even said I had to pay him for all the dates we had been on. I wasn't in a financial position to do that, so I hung up again. I went to work the next night. I was working nights as a waitress at the time, and my mind was on Martin all night. I was worried he would come after me for the money or something worse. I got off around 1 a.m. and took the bus home. When I got to my door, my heart sank. The door was wide open. I took a cautious step inside, and as soon as I did, I knew someone had been there. My mind immediately went to Martin. I called out hello, but there was no response. I walked through the place, fear flowing through my body. When I got to my room, I noticed something on my bed. It was a piece of paper. I picked it up and turned it over. There was a message written on it that said, "You're dead." That was enough. I ran out of there and never went back. I went to a friend's house that night and called the police. They were able to arrest Martin with my testimony, as well as the evidence they were able to gather from my apartment. After the police interrogated Martin, they found out he was completely broke and was paying for our dates with borrowed money on various credit cards. I was really confused by that for a while, but when I saw a documentary on Netflix, it started to make sense. In the documentary, a guy used Tinder to impress women with gifts and expensive dates, then tricked them into lending him money and promised to pay them back, but never did. My relationship with Martin never got that far, but I suspected was heading in that direction. That would explain why he wanted me to pay him back afterward. After that, I never heard from him again, and I'm more careful about who I meet online. This reminds me of an old saying my grandfather used to use: "If it seems too good to be true, it probably is."